These are our monthly EcoDharma explorations, and I am coming to you from the Potomac River watershed, the historic and continuous lands of the Piscataway people. I am forever grateful for the ways in which they have loved this place into its present and continuous well-being, protectors and nourishers that they have been. Always grateful. And I'm really excited about today. We have with us our partners at Braided Wisdom, who are going to be hosting this as part of our new partnership with Braided Wisdom Spirit Rock. So this three-way partnership has been underway for a while, but this is the first one that Braided Wisdom is hosting. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and dear one, Carol Kano. Carol, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's really good to be here. My name is Carol Kano. I'm the founder and executive director of Braided Wisdom. I am currently residing in the Wiyot Nation up in Humboldt County. Braided Wisdom is a cross-cultural mindfulness organization weaving together Indigenous wisdom, Buddha Dharma, earth-based traditions. The centerpiece of our work is healing justice, as we envision a humanity that thrives in mutual respect and deep connection to the earth through collectively cultivating joy, healing, belonging, freedom for all beings. We are deeply grateful for this partnership with One Earth Sangha and Spirit Rock Meditation Center. Together, we are widening and deepening the circle of shared caretakers, bringing forward practices and wisdom traditions that remind us we belong to the earth, we're not separate from it. We know we are living in times of a polycrisis, ecological decline, climate devastation, and deep social division. In such a moment, it is essential that that Indigenous voices and worldviews are not only included, but centered in leading the conversation. These traditions have for millennia to this day have carried teachings of reciprocity, balance, collective care, and teachings that are urgently needed as humanity searches for a way forward. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here with all of you and in this partnership and with Dr. Gray and those of Holdy, Monique, and Danny. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Carol and Kristen. And welcome everyone to EcoDharma Explorations and today's special session, A Tree of Peace, the power of remembering the Indigenous design of the American democracy. My name is Danny Jung, pronouns she, her, and I'm calling in from the unceded land of the Ramaytush Ohlone people, and I'll be your moderator for today. And much gratitude to our team member, Monique Calfé, as well, who is the amazing magic behind the scenes today. I'm going to go ahead and begin our introduction of our guest speaker for today's EcoDharma exploration, Dr. Leslie Gray. Dr. Gray is a Native American clinical psychologist based in San Francisco. She has taught eco-psychology, anthropology of consciousness, and Native American psychology at Bay Area universities, including UC Berkeley. Dr. Gray offers workshops in the US and abroad, as well as trainings for practitioners who want to integrate Indigenous worldviews into their work. She's the founder and director of the Woodfish Foundation, which promotes sustainability grounded in Indigenous knowledge. And she's also an associate of the Milton Erickson Institute, a member of the Society of Indian Psychologists, and vice president of the Association for Transpersonal Psychology. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gray.
Good to be here. I'm coming to you from the city of San Francisco, right in the heart of it on Russian Hill, in what is aboriginally the land of the Yelamu Ohlone. The Ohlone are the nation that goes all the way from San Francisco down to Big Sur. And all around us up north, there's the Hoopa and the Karuk, and then over to the right, the Wintu, on a map, and then down below them, the Miwok, the inland Miwok around Yosemite, and then the coastal Miwok all along the coast up through Marin. And then down below us, other Ohlone tribes, the Costanoan, there's the Indians of Indian Canyon. And when I mention these places, and when I mention the tribal peoples that Aboriginally hold those lands, I know these people. These are not like names or, I studied for years with Lauren Smith up at Pomo and have given grants down at Indian Canyon where Anne Marie Sayers, the great Indian elder, is. And I say this because I really want to reinforce that these are living peoples among us now, and that there is a strong revitalization of California Indian culture, life, practices, languages going on right now. But today, I want to talk about the part of the country that I'm from, currently known as New England, and in particular, the part of New England where the Six Nations, the Iroquois, the Haudenosaunee people are, people of the Longhouse. They will come to play in my trying to remind you all of the original spirit of American democracy. So, in order to do that, I thought I'd start somewhat experientially by beginning our session with the words that must be said before all else. These are words that are spoken at the beginning of most ceremonies, at the beginning of council meetings, and in particular, they are the words upon which rest Iroquois or Haudenosaunee governance, Iroquois democracy. So these words are also, by the way, usually translated as a Thanksgiving address, which really, yes, there's gratitude involved in them, but it really minimizes what they're meant to do. They're meant to establish a certain kind of relation. So I'm going to have you join me in doing this, and you can lean back and see if, in addition to deep listening, you can also maybe see the things that I'm talking about in your mind's eye. So today we have gathered and we see that the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. So now we bring our minds together as one, as we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. Now our minds are one. We are all thankful to our mother, the earth, for she gives us all that we need for life. She supports our feet as we walk about upon her. It gives us joy that she continues to care for us as she has from the beginning of time. To our mother, we send greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. We give thanks to all the waters of the world for quenching our thirst and providing us with strength. Water is life. We know its power in many forms: waterfalls and rains, mists and streams, rivers and oceans. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the spirit of water. Now our minds are one. We turn our minds to the fish, to all the fish life in the water. They were instructed to cleanse and purify the water. They also give themselves as food. We are grateful that we can still find pure water. So now we turn to the fish and send our greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. Now we turn toward the vast fields of plant life. As far as the eye can see, the plants grow, working many wonders. They sustain many life forms. With our minds gathered together, we give thanks and look forward to seeing plant life for many generations to come. Now our minds are one. With one mind, we turn to honor and thank all of the food plants that we harvest from the garden. Since the beginning of time, the grains, vegetables, beans, and berries have helped the people survive. Many other living things draw strength from them too. We gather all the plant foods together as one and send them a greeting of thanks. Now our minds are one. Now we turn to all the medicine herbs of the world. From the beginning, they were instructed to take away sickness. They are always waiting and ready to heal us. We are happy they are still among us. And we are happy there are still among us those special few who remember how to use these plants for healing. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the medicines and the keepers of the medicines. Now our minds are one. We gather our minds together to send greetings and thanks to all the animal life in the world. They have many things to teach us as people. We are honored by them when they give up their lives so we may use their bodies as food for our people. We see them near our homes and in the deep forests. We are glad they are still here, and we hope that it will always be so. Now our minds are one. We gather now and turn our thoughts to the trees. The earth has many families of trees who have their own instructions and uses. Some provide us with shelter and shade, others with fruit, beauty, and useful things. With one mind, we greet and thank the tree life. Now our minds are one. We put our minds together as one and thank all the birds who move and fly about over our heads. The Creator gave them beautiful songs. Each day they remind us to enjoy and appreciate life. The eagle was chosen to be their leader. To all the birds, from the smallest to the largest, we send our joyful greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. We are all thankful to the powers we know as the four winds. We hear their voices in the moving air as they refresh us and purify the air we breathe. They help us to bring the change of seasons. From the four directions they come, bringing us messages and giving us strength. With one mind, we send our greetings and thanks to the four winds. Now we turn to the west where our grandfathers, the thunder beings, live. With lightning and thundering voices, they bring with them the water that renews life. We bring our minds together as one to send greetings and thanks to our grandfathers, the thunderers. Now our minds are one. We now send greetings and thanks to our eldest brother, the sun. Each day without fail, he travels the sky from east to west, bringing the light of a new day. The sun is the source of all the fires of life. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to our brother, the sun. Now our minds are one. We put our minds together to give thanks to our eldest grandmother, the moon, who lights the nighttime sky. She is the leader of woman all over, and she governs the movement of the ocean tides. By her changing face, we measure time, and it is the moon who watches over the arrival of children here on earth. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to our grandmother, the moon. Now our minds are one. We give thanks to the stars who are spread brightly across the sky. We see them in the night, helping the moon to light the darkness and bringing dew to the gardens and growing things. When we travel at night, they guide us home. With our minds gathered together as one, we send greetings and thanks to the stars. Now our minds are one. We gather our minds to greet and thank the teachers who have come to help throughout the ages. When we forget how to live in harmony, they remind us of the way we were instructed to live as people. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to these caring teachers. Now our minds are one. Now we turn our thoughts to Great Spirit and send greetings and thanks for all the gifts of creation. Everything we need to live a good life is here on Mother Earth. For all the love that is still around us, we gather our minds together as one and send our choicest words of greeting and thanks to Great Spirit. Now our minds are one. We have now arrived at the place where we end our words. Of all the things we have named, it was not our intention to leave anything out. If something was forgotten, we leave it to each individual to send such greetings and thanks in their own way. Now our minds are one. So that is the way the process of governing in a council begins in the Longhouse. It does so very many things, but at a minimum, it's an acknowledgement of interdependence. And it's very psychologically sophisticated because it takes the trouble to establish rapport before going on to the business of government. This is highly intelligent. The other thing it does is it establishes a spiritual center, not a religious center, a spiritual center. And that is done by focusing on that which fills us with awe, which is nature, and that which we all share and are part of. And that gets away from belief systems and creeds and all of that, but it gives a very firm spiritual center. And there are values woven within this, and they become shared values as you listen to this and you see, yes, I think that's so. Values of respect, respect. Values of respect, reciprocity, balance, gratitude, harmony with nature's cycles. All of those are embedded in that imagery, those words. And it brings us to a place that we can agree about, regardless of what differences we might have. We can all feel grateful to be here, grateful to be supported and allowed to thrive on the earth. So I think it's heartening and inspiring to remember that when Europeans came here, they encountered the oldest, and what is still today, the oldest continuous democracy on earth, that of the League of the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederacy. And that came about because, well over the 250 years that the United States democracy has been in existence, it's well over 1,000 years, the Haudenosaunee democracy. Well over 1,000 years old. We don't really date it, we say long time ago. So what was happening a long time ago was tremendous warring and fighting, fierce, horrendously fierce fighting for many years among the tribes and nations, the clans, tribes, and nations of that area we call New England today. Specifically the Mohawk, the Oneida, the Onondaga, the Cayuga, and the Seneca. These were the great tribes, great clans, and great encompassing nations of that area. So along came a prophet, came from the north, Deganawida. Deganawida had a vision. He had been given a vision, and he brought it to share with everyone. And we don't know exactly what, but he had some sort of a speech impediment. So he had a helper that spoke this vision for him, and that was Ayenwenta, which is sometimes translated as Hiawatha, but it is Ayenwenta. And Ayenwenta was in one of the most fiercely warring nations, the Onondaga. And he himself was a fierce warrior, but he had 7 daughters, and several of these daughters were murdered horribly, and his wife in the course of all this fighting. And he went into profound grieving. And he was deeply depressed, and he wandered off, and he came by a river, and he stared into the river, and as he did, he saw something white and shimmering in the bottom of the river, and that was the shell. It was a shell that's white in the center and purple along the edges. And he picked this up, and he began to use it as a form of condolence for himself. It had powers that helped him heal. And that is why to this day that shell, which is of the quahog clam, is what it's called today, is used. That's what wampum is made of. Wampum is the method of diplomacy of the Haudenosaunee as a result of this. So Deganawida and Ayenwenta went traveling along, trying to convince the tribes to put down their arms and to come under the branches of a great tree of peace and form an alliance. And many were not listening to him. The first person that listened to him was a woman, Jigon Sase was her name. And she lived by a river and had a house where everyone was welcome. Everyone could come and refresh themselves and have food, but they had to leave their weapons outside. They could not bring them inside of her lodge. And she had been doing this for quite a while. So when the peacemaker came along with Ayenwenta, they came to her lodge and they told her the vision of peace and of strength through peace. And she liked this, said, yes, this is good. This is good. I agree with this. So it's a very long story, let me just say, but I would say that the 3 of them went about convincing the tribes one by one, convincing until they had convinced all of the nations except one, and that was the Onondaga, which was the fiercest tribe and had the fiercest leader, Tatadaho. Tatadaho lived away from the people out in the forest. They say he was a cannibal. Some say he had snakes in his hair. But in any event, it was the basest and lowest that a human being could be. And the most careless of others, the most self-absorbed and willing to destroy anybody and anything for himself. And they told him, the message of peace, and he didn't want to listen. And Jigonsese had been hearing a song in her head that she heard. It was the sound of a bird. A bird had brought a song to her, and she taught it to the peacemaker and to Hayenwenta, and they approached Tatadaho singing this song. And from this song, they got him to begin to listen. And Ayanwenta smoothed out the snakes from his hair and combed the snakes out of his hair, which is Ayanwenta actually means he combs the hair. And he was all twisted. He was a twisted human being, and they literally got him to straighten out. And then they did something, so clever. They made him the primary keeper of the peace for all the nations. And they made Onondaga, his land, the place where the central fire would be kept for all the nations. And to this day, since that time, that his name has become a title. So at any one time, the Iroquois have a Tatadaho, as who is the Tatadaho now? You might be asked, and they make sure and keep the nations together. So there's a lot of psychological sophistication that goes on in the Iroquois story of how you create peace. And this peace, which is also a law, sometimes it's translated as the great law of peace, the great peace, the great law, all an attempt to express what this thing is, this compact, this covenant, this agreement. And the approach was very, very diplomatic. Gayanashagoa, which is the Haudenosaunee name for the great peace, the great law. In that word, the peace and law are fused. You can't really do that in English. But it established a federal government in which an attack on one was an attack on all. And the way that this came about, the way that this message was transmitted was that the peacemakers stood in front of the nations, having invited their leaders under the branches of a great tree, the eastern pine. And he held out an arrow and he snapped it in front of them. And then he took 5 arrows for each of the 5 nations, bound with the sinew of deer, and showed, see, you cannot break it. In unity, there is strength, was the message. And the people listened to this and said, yes, this is good. We agree to this. And he taught them about the balance of power. He created basically a council of chiefs, war chiefs, and clan mothers is sort of the balance. It's very intricate, but in that, for example, the only way you become a chief, and by the way, the word for chief that gets translated as chief is royane, and that word means people of the good mind. A lot different from chief, isn't it? Which really implies inherently hierarchy. And he taught them about the peaceful transfer of power, which is done in a condolence ceremony. So that when one leader of a nation passes, the next leader is they raise up the next leader by placing in a condolence ceremony for the loss of the previous leader. And but what gets transferred is these antlers, which are the symbol of your position as leader. And that goes on. So you have this concept of that the leadership office continues and continues, even though the particular leader sadly has passed. So that is how he created the peaceful transfer of power. And some of you may know that in England, I mean, the primary way one became king of England for so long was to kill the former king or kill the present king. What's important to know here is that the founding fathers had encountered a living example of democracy, a living example of a central government, of federalism that had independent members. So each of the various nations kept their kept their language, kept their religion. There's a belief system. They had different deities. All of that was kept by each group. So they had their independence, but at the same time, they participated in a strong central government. You know, there's no example in Europe or in antiquity of this kind of democracy. You know, you often hear this. People attribute democracy to Greece or to Rome. Absolutely not. In Greece, there was a period for a couple of hundred years starting around the 5th century, just in Athens, primarily in Athens, of a demos. This is where they took the word, but it was only propertied men that were, and a small group of them. It was really a small elite group that shared power. Same thing, of course, in Rome. You know, the vast majority of people had no ability to affect change. They weren't part of the Roman Senate, which, you know, was at least was a republic rather than a monarchy, but it certainly didn't have representative democracy. You know, that we get the word family from the Roman word for slave, familias, which was so the pater familias, the father of the family, or the dominus, the lord, the dominator, essentially owned the family. The familias included the wife, the children, the land, the slaves, all the property belonged to that man, and he was free he could kill one of his children or kill his wife if he wanted to without any penalty. So this is not the model of democracy, you know, and the slavery was unbelievable. You know, in just one of Julius Caesar's campaigns in Gaul, he brought back 1 million slaves. I mean, so rigid hierarchy, total male dominance, no representative democracy whatsoever, just a tiny group of elite propertied males agreeing that they would run things themselves instead of having just one king or monarch. So, you know, there was no real example, and certainly no living example. Benjamin Franklin attended the treaty councils of the Iroquois for 13 years. He took notes. He then published his notes of these 13 years of observing how the Iroquois ran their government, and it was his most popular book outside of the Almanac, which was just a farmer's thing for planting and predicting the weather. But in terms of what people read by Benjamin Franklin, that's what they read. So the colonists were very, very familiar with Haudenosaunee government. In addition, at the Treaty of Lancaster, there were over 250 Haudenosaunee representatives, and the speeches from that were published in newspapers, widely read. The most famous speeches were by Kanasa Tego, who was an Onondaga leader. And there's a very famous speech by him advising the colonists to unite. I'm going to read just a small part of that. But this is what he said to the American colonists. colonists. We have one thing further to say, and that is we heartily recommend union and a good agreement between you, our brethren. Never disagree, but preserve a strict friendship for one another, and thereby you as well as we will become the stronger. Our wise forefathers established union and amity between the 5 nations. This has made us formidable. This has given us great weight and authority with our neighboring nations. We are a powerful confederacy, and by your observing the same methods that our wise forefathers have taken, you will acquire fresh strength and power. Therefore, whatever befalls you, whatever may befall you, never fall out with one another. So that's, directly saying to them, form a union. So Benjamin Franklin in particular tried to take that example of the Haudenosaunee and get the other colonies to imitate it. But he did, so maybe some of you by now are wondering, why don't I know some of this? I didn't learn this in school. And I'm going to put forward that is very deliberate. There were some implications to acknowledging that the United States model of government was based on Iroquois government. For one thing, it's really hard to maintain a notion of white supremacy if you're attributing the democracy that you value so much and think of so highly to Native people. And so how did Franklin get them to imitate the Native people, the Indigenous people, so in a way that they could still think of themselves as superior? And here's a sample. He said to them, "It would be a very strange thing if 6 nations of ignorant savages should be capable of forming a scheme for such a union and be able to execute it in such a manner as that it has subsisted ages and appears indissoluble, and yet that a like union should be impracticable for 10 or a dozen English colonies." So notice that little psychological trick there, because it goes on rampantly today. He holds something up as a model, admires it, essentially says it's ingenious, but then removes the authorship of that from the people who are, of course, just ignorant savages. And we are so much more able to do this than they are. Anybody recognize that? So in addition to taking the form of the government, the founding fathers, and I really do mean founding fathers, because Native people were present at many, many gatherings, such as the Treaty of Lancaster. And the Native people came with women. They came with their women leaders, with the clan mothers. But never did the founding fathers. Only their propertied males came. So I want to show you some of I was going to say, they not only took the form of government, but they took the imagery of the Haudenosaunee. So I want to show you some of that imagery now. That is the white pine tree, Pinus strobus. Onenase is the Iroquois word. And that is what the peacemaker used as his image to bring the people together. So that's a photo of one, And here's an illustration of one from a book of plants. But what I want you to see, this is what the leaves are like. And you'll notice there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leaves together forming one leaf. And the peacemaker pointed to that and said, in the same way, we 5 nations can become one. The white pine, by the way, is responsible for most of the wealth of the early founding of this nation. That when the Europeans came here, there were the whole place was filled with old growth white pine, and they have very unique properties. They're very, very strong, but also can move with the wind. And they were perfect for making the masts for English ships. And they were, cut down and sent off to England and made people prosperous. And they also freed England from having to go to the Baltic states because England had cut down its own trees and they were buying expensive trees from the Baltic states. So it really fits into the early economy. And you'll see that many states even today have white pines on their flag, on the state flag. So here you see a sketch of the white pine, and this is what he was showing them, that you will come under these branches, and along each of these branches will be the clans, the various clans of the nation states. And the leaders come from those clans, and the warriors come from those clans. And so he lifted up a tree and had people put under it. That right there is a war club underneath the roots right there. And he had people put their weapons under that and put the tree back and planted it. So he grew the tree of peace out of weapons buried in the earth. And this is where we get the expression to bury the hatchet. At the top of the tree, you can see an eagle, and that eagle was to look everywhere, to be hyper vigilant against any sort of threat or threat to the Confederacy. This is an illustration of what went on with the peacemaker and the gathering of the 5 nations, later to become 6 when the Tuscarora were added. And as you can see, as you go down the tree, there's the different clans under the branches of the tree. And down below, this is an illustration by Oren Lyons, who is currently the faith keeper of the Onondaga. There is the peacemaker, and there is Ayanwenta. The peacemaker is holding, as you can see, binded arrows, 5 binded arrows, and Ayanwenta is speaking the prophecy. And then down below, you see Turtle Island. They're standing on Turtle Island, which is what the Haudenosaunee call what is called by the Europeans America, North America, Onesase. And I wanted you to see what the Europeans saw when they arrived in the land of the Haudenosaunee. They saw people that lived in longhouses, and these longhouses were formed in villages. And they're made with cedar poles, and then that's bendable elm planks around them. It's the kind of the ultimate ecological house. These poles are made of cedar, so they last like 20 to 30 years without decaying, and they keep out pests. After 30 years, after a generation, you pick up the whole village and move it to another place, and you drive these homes back into the ground. And then 20 or 30 years later, at the new place, you move to another place, and then you come full circle back to the place you originally were, and by now the trees have grown up again. And you come to the place where you were born, and you have a place that's been prepared. So you took the village that you lived in and prepared it for future generations. And that was what the peacemaker's message was, that you should always do everything in consideration of the 7 generations that came before and those 7 generations to come. And the actual words are those 7 generations whose faces have not yet emerged from the earth. People lived in these longhouses. Many people lived in them, and people gave birth all the time. Everyone knew that babies don't come out of the earth. They were making a point about where we all come from. This is what the interior looked like. Beds along the sides with furs, 3 fireplaces. And this is an actual depiction by the Dutch of what they saw when they came here. So really hard to look at that and tell yourself that the land was empty, terra nullius. But they'd managed to. That's what many people think in their history. So I mentioned wampum before, which is made of shells, the quahog clam, which has a dense purple ridge and a pure white center. And out of these shells this is how compacts, the Haudenosaunee languages it's an oral tradition. And but the way that things were remembered, agreements were remembered, the way that messages were sent out was on these beaded belts, wampum belts. And this is a very famous belt. This is the belt that establishes the connection among the 5 nations. In the center, of course, is the Onondaga, where you see this tree, the Mohawk, the Cayuga, the Onondaga, Oneida, and the Seneca, bound together in the League of the Iroquois. And this is called the Ayanwinta belt. And then the George Washington belt. This belt was commissioned by George Washington after the Revolutionary War to make a new compact with the Haudenosaunee people to replace the one that the King George had. And so now they were in relation to those colonists, not as British colonists, but as new members of the newly created United States. And you can see there's 13 figures, and then in the center is a longhouse. And they have linked arms, which is the way that peace and cooperation were demonstrated. This is a much more recent picture with Oren Lyons right there, the faith keeper for the Onondaga, holding that belt, which he took to Washington in 2014 to the White House to protest the violation of that treaty. This is two-row wampum. So the first treaty was with the Dutch in 1613. And this formalized a relationship with the Dutch and with the Mohawk. And the Dutch, they wanted a patriarchal relationship. And you will be as our child and we will be the father. And the Mohawk said, no. We will be your brother. And so this describes the canoe and the ship, each sailing along in its own river of life, in tandem, but respecting each other's differences. It has a lot more meaning than that. The wampum belts are very complicated. They look simple and they are not in the least. And people train in each clan to learn to read the wampum. And then that person trains the next person and the next person. So, I can't really read the depth of what the wampum is saying. I just know the more obvious things. And then as to the borrowed imagery, so as you can see, here's the Great Seal of the United States. There's the eagle, and there are the bundled arrows. There are 13 arrows there, illustrating strength and unity. And then, of course, it's also on the dollar bill. That didn't come about till the 1930, but in many one, right? The principle of the United States and exactly the principle of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. And then, of course, on the other side is this image of an Egyptian pyramid. The founding fathers were absolutely entranced with Egypt. Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new order of the ages. Down at the bottom is written 1776 in Roman numerals, and there are 13 steps to that pyramid, at the top of which is the eye of providence. The founding fathers constantly talked about providence. And they felt that being in this land was providence. Now, providence is a word that has the same root as provide and provisions. And they thought that everything here was essentially given to them by an almighty force. A lot of things were left out. This is a crucial thing that you can see when you take a good hard look at the Iroquois democracy compared to the democracy that was established in 1776. Some of the differences are women had equal power with the Haudenosaunee. Women could hire and fire chiefs. And there was a whole list of, all you had to do to be president of the United States was to be born here and to be a certain age. Where to be a leader among the Haudenosaunee, there was a long list of requirements that the clan mothers had about your character and how you comported yourself, and you mustn't profit from your office, and a long list. And if you didn't keep that agreement, the clan mothers essentially would send a war chief to you if you were a leader who didn't make your decision, particularly if you did not make decisions considering the 7 generations that came before and those 7 generations to come, then a war chief was sent to you and basically you were told, that's 1. And then if you did it again, that's 2. And the 3rd, you lost your position. Indeed, you were publicly shunned with a very formal ceremony. Another thing is that the Iroquois Confederacy said there could be no slavery. All humans have the same value, as opposed to there being such a thing as 3/5 of a human in the United States Constitution. So you start to get, with these things, you start to get a key to the idea of why the founding fathers hid the fact that the United States democracy was derived from the great law of the Iroquois. It's a kind of disinformation. Because if you thought that and you were a colonist and then you took a good look at the Haudenosaunee government, you'd notice right away, well, women have equal power. And the founding fathers didn't want that. Women had no right to vote. They had no right to have bank accounts. They had no right to own property, etc. And that was just fine with the founding fathers. And also, obviously, they had a deep vested interest in slavery. And yeah. So there was one more thing I wanted to mention, that this idea of a spiritual center. This is what the Haudenosaunee said, you must have a spiritual center to your democracy. And there was this false alternative set between having a spiritual center and separation of church and state. The Haudenosaunee definitely had separation of church and state. They definitely had, that central government that they all belonged to did not interfere in any way with the particular beliefs of particular nations. But they did insist that there be a spiritual center, that the center of this democracy not be based on things, on material things, but on values and shared beliefs and that sort of thing. So, it's interesting that when Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, he said, we hold these truths to be sacred, that all men are created equal. And the other founding fathers changed it to, we hold these truths to be self-evident. I think that was unfortunate. So this tree is about transformation from selfishness to mutual protection. It's actually an alteration of consciousness, different way of thinking about being here. I want to make clear that from the Native point of view, particularly the Haudenosaunee point of view, capitalism and socialism are the same. They both have at their core economic determinism rather than spirituality. And, we see this and say, problem coming. So I would even assert that almost every threat to American democracy that we've had is due to omitting those 3 things: a spiritual center, women have equal power, and no slavery. And just imagine what it would be like if a council of elder women, a council of grandmothers, could fire the president or fire a senator or a congressperson who didn't conduct themselves with the goodwill of the people in mind, with the health of the democracy in mind. So how do we repair this fracture, this tearing apart of what original democracy was? So I have a few suggestions, and I'm sure many of you do too. But just a few ideas from a Haudenosaunee perspective. The first thing would be to educate yourself about the origins of democracy. Trace the white roots of peace. You know, that's the way we talk about it. But you know, the eastern pine has, when they're very developed, have external roots also, and they're big, thick, strong roots that grow over and around rocks and are very visible. And so it's a vivid image to talk about trace those roots to the tree of peace. And that was the way that the peacemaker framed it. He said that, you know, these roots go in 4 directions, which is another way of the indigenous people saying the totality. They go everywhere. So it was an invitation to any and all to come under the branches of the great tree of peace. The other thing is to utilize deliberation and dialogue with those with whom you disagree. And this is a key component of the way Haudenosaunee governance took place. Was people debated, and long amount of time was given to dialogue. And it might seem like it was, you know, a very long process, but it actually made things go much more quickly later on when you were making decisions about the life of the people. It's that establishment of rapport that is critical to group decision making in a healthy way. The other thing I would say is to begin to utilize biomimesis for problem solving. You may notice that that is exactly what the core of the Iroquois democracy is. It is derived from a tree, from the way a tree creates its leaves, from the strong, solid trunk, the spiritual center, and coming under the branches and burying the weapons of war, burying our disagreements, and make them nourishment for the peace itself. You know, there's some research going on. Give you an example of biomimesis that I really like. There's research right now going on fog harvesting. A lot of places that are arid coastal areas that don't have enough water, or even inland like Mexico City, desperate for water. They don't have water, but they have fog. And the reason people don't capture the fog and turn it into water and use it for drinking water or bathing water, whatever you is that it was caught. It can be caught with screens, but you know, these metal screens or plastic screens, but it doesn't. It's very expensive. It involves very expensive equipment. It's time consuming, etc. But there's research going on right now of fog harvesting by imitating the sequoias, imitating the redwoods. Redwoods get almost 50% of their water from the air, from fog. And they do it by these grooved leaves, grooved spine leaves that collects the water very effectively, and also they're angled in such a way as to return that water down to the roots of the tree. And so the research going on right now is instead of using screens, make these slats that imitate the leaves of that tree, and it is more effective and cheaper at collecting water. So it's a way of thinking. I'm not suggesting specific inventions, but to start thinking like that. That's another thing you can do. The other thing you can do is to know your enemy. I had a Miwok teacher who told me He said, Leslie, you should know your enemy so well. You should know your enemy so well that he's no longer your enemy. Boy, did that rankle me. I couldn't, yeah, I know it sounds good, but I kept thinking about the reality of it. And I did not like the reality of it as I thought about it, especially when you get a vivid image of your enemy, that sounds like a lot of philosophy. But no, it's just plain practical. And that's diplomacy. And is diplomacy that binds together the Haudenosaunee, wampum diplomacy. And so the last thing I'll mention is something that I would recommend personally, is to be the faith keepers. I'm not saying that you can be necessarily like the Haudenosaunee and have state appointed, faith keepers that are appointed by the state that keep a fire, a council fire. But wherever you are, especially locally, in situations, all sorts of situations, be the one that reminds people of our connection to each other, that reminds people of interdependence. Take the risk, maybe even the risk of sounding corny, the risk of sounding not hard enough or tough enough or smart enough or edgy enough, Be the faith keeper. And that's my last words.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gray. Wow. I invite everyone to take a deep breath and let some of the beautiful wisdom from Dr. Gray land in our hearts and bodies. Before we transition to our official closing, I'd like to take a moment to invite all of you in the audience who've remained with us still to share again one word in the chat that captures your experience of today's session. One word in the chat sharing, how your experience was today. And invite the group to just take a moment to scan the chat. Inspired, heartened, relieved, inspiration, enlightening, uplifted, blessed, affirming, informative, truth, thoughtful, hopeful, enriched, enlightening, expansion, illuminate, necessary, connected, encouraged, truth, brought to tears, vision, inspired. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for letting the energy of the collective conversation sink in and hoping that it will carry with you through the day. We're going to move into our just quick announcements. If this was a compelling conversation for you, we invite you to join us again on September 28th. EcoDharma Exploration will be with Conda Mason on September 28th. Registration information will be forthcoming. For Braided Wisdom, we have a couple of sessions coming up. If you'd like to join us again, we have a Let's Practice Together meditation session with a teacher on September 7th. Monique is sending that in the chat. And we also have our beautiful Original Medicine 4-part series on September 27th as well. And for One Earth Sangha, the Eco Sattva, the newest iteration of the training program, will be available on October 12th. Please check that out. And of course, Dr. Gray also has an upcoming program called Spirit Warrior, an ancient pathway to modern courage. And you're welcome to contact Dr. Gray for that information as well. And I believe that One Earth Sangha will be sending out this as a follow-up as well. And then lastly, we hope that you've enjoyed the experience today. We'd like to hear from you before we close our gathering with our dedication of merit. We'd like to welcome your reflections, as they're very valuable to us here at Braided Wisdom, One Earth Sangha, and Spirit Rock. We're going to send a link in the chat for you to click and share your input with us. And with that said, right on time, I'm going to invite in Carol Cano for our dedication of merit to close out.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gray. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, One Earth Sangha. By this merit, may we awaken to our inner being, the deep interconnectedness of our earth and all of life. May we see that the suffering of our planet is our own, and its flourishing is our own. May we live simply, tread lightly, and act with loving kindness. May our mindfulness water the seeds of care, wisdom, and healing in ourselves and in the world. May we become peace in action, compassion embodied, and harmony restored. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you.